Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And I will continue in somewhat the same line you just heard, beginning by saying that the times are changing. Some of you musically inclined know where I got that line. And with them, law, medical practice, and medical ethics are also changing. Once banned, physician assisted uh, suicide or dying is now legal for 20% of the people in the United States and for all of them in Canada. It's obvious that physician assisted dying is a popular change. It's increasingly being made legal. And if this thing will continue, as it should, right, you'll see that in a poll done by the Pew Research several years ago, a high percentage of the people in the country thought that this, in the USA, thought that this was a reasonable way to go. And a good many of these were people who professed religions which do not agree with that. The new legal right in these states has raised a number of serious medical and ethical issues for participating professionals. In most jurisdictions, there's the requirement that in addition to the attending doctor, that there be a second person, usually another physician, someone who is skilled in ethics, who must agree that the requesting patient is already dying with probably less than 6 months to live, is sane, not just depressed, and understands the consequences of what he or she is asking for. And this is what, hard to persuade this. And this is what a high percentage of Americans are supporting. It's also where ethics, law, and medicine all come together. The medical treatment itself is relatively simple. The patient is simply given a lethal dose of what we call secobarbital. The United Kingdom, it's quinolbarbitone. They're giving instructions on how to take it in order to achieve the desired result. But the attending doctor does not administer the medicine to the patient directly, which is euthanasia, the subject you just heard about. The physician actively killing the willing patient. This is not legal in the United States, although it is in Canada, and it's not what we're discussing here today. For some patients, a simple possession of the means of ending their life whenever they wish, and the comfort of knowing that they're in control of their own life is enough. And some of them never take the medicine. They just keep it knowing that if they want to go on, they can. So that makes a harder task for the physician than that of giving the medicine, and that's to estimate accurately how long the patient will live if they don't take the medicine. And here again, the changing times have made it hard for the physician. Historically, doctors really had developed a wonderful aptitude for prognosis, and usually were very precise at the natural course of a disease. Unfortunately, they rarely could do anything about that natural course, and events simply took place. Now, increasingly over the last century, rapidly expanding ability to prolong life by various medical treatments, successfully treating these previously fatal diseases has disrupted all these historical teachings about the expected course of an illness. So when can the treating doctor be sure that one more treatment might not keep the ill person going for another year? Maybe there's something new out there we haven't tried yet. Well, one time is when the patient says, that's it, I'm done, I don't want any more, I've suffered enough already, let me go. Current medical ability to prolong life with contemporary treatments is amazing, but it often comes at a very high price, both mental and physical, to the patient and to the patient's loved ones. New times have brought new problems. The right of the patient to discontinue treatment, let the disease take its natural course, has been legally recognized in the entire United States since 1990 by a Supreme Court decision. And the patient can prevent caregivers from prolonging their life by further treatment. Now, there's this legal right of the patient to prevent being given treatment to prolong their life. What we're talking about is giving them the ability to shorten their life. The ability to prevent further treatment is recognized in medicine, law, and ethics. There's no question about this. The more difficult question for the doctor is this patient just depressed, and would some psychotherapy, some medication be enough to make this patient want to go on longer? And the main focus of my presentation today is one part of the assessment of the rationality of the patient's request, which is rarely mentioned in the literature, and this question isn't brought up at all in the recent 130-page report of the National Academy of Medicine. And that missing question is, what does the patient think is going to happen after they take the medicine? What's going to happen after death? What's next? If the patient believes that death is the end of everything, they'll simply cease to exist now and forever in any form, or if they think they'll go to hell for offending their God, then prematurely ending this life is drastic, and there may be a less sane decision than if one believes that ending this life simply opens the door to another, probably better one than this painful one. Thomas Hardy said, "Flesh perishes, I live on." There's not time today, and I certainly don't have the theological expertise to cover the wide varieties of belief as to the afterlife. But I do want the consulting ethicist to be aware that there are these beliefs and what their effects on the patient's decision and on their ethical evaluation of the influence of these beliefs on the patient's decision. Some religions believe life will continue, probably in a different form, just as the caterpillar changes into a butterfly or a moth, very different being, but actually the same basic person, basic soul. And in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, they're all some form of belief in further life, maybe in a different form. And other religions teach that there'll be an afterlife where at some time, possibly after a period of cleansing or purgatory, there'll be a judgment as to whether this next existence will be blissful or possibly a form of punishment. There'll be a resurrection on Judgment Day, and there's assignment to go to heaven or go to hell. At least this is Dante's impression a good many hundred years ago as to what heaven and hell would look like. The major Western religions, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, all have some version of belief in an afterlife, usually after a period of repose or purgatory. But not only do different religions have different concepts of the afterlife, it's quite obvious that within a religion there are conflicting views. It's also quite obvious that some people who espouse a certain religion have a different view of the afterlife than that promulgated by scholars and clergy of that faith. Many Americans are quite sure that when they die, they'll soon be with previously departed family members and friends, and they look forward to this meeting. There will be no waiting for this far-off Judgment Day, when everyone from all time will be judged really at one time. And the major Western religions, I say, always have some version of this afterlife. It may not be shared by the practitioners of that faith, so simply knowing that a patient's stated religion is such doesn't mean that the patient believes it. And in America, if one just looks at illustrated views of life after death, they usually revolve not around what you've seen in these previous pictures, but around, and not where you have to wait for a period of time, but where there is a rapid ascent to heaven, and as soon as they die, they'll be at heaven's gate for admission by St. Peter. And this isn't the heaven that you saw in those previous pictures that Dante many years ago had imagined. This one has a set of marble steps that lead up to the gate where St. Peter sits as a gatekeeper to judge one's qualifications to enter this well-ordered community of past relatives and friends. One enters in human form, and one wonders how to get to the next slide, which is there. This is a recent drawing that shows former President Bush's wife, who died recently, instantly meeting with her daughter, who had died in infancy decades ago. And a happy reunion. This is immediately after death. This is not the belief that you've read about, and certainly not the ones that Dante imagined. And this entry into heaven is immediate. There's no waiting. You see here the man whose parachute has failed. In the few seconds before he lands, the angel calculates that he'll be at heaven's gates. This is going to be in less than 2 seconds. This isn't what we've been taught about the requirement for waiting in purgatory or in a state of repose. And finally, this view of heaven that I've shown you has a semi-official status in the U.S. in the last verse of our Marine hymn, which looks upon heaven as somewhere that has well-ordered, well-guarded streets, which isn't a city, which is inhabited by all the friends and relatives who've gone on before. Now, if this is the patient's vision of the future, is it any surprise that rational persons dying painfully would wish to speed up the process with help from their physicians so they can move more rapidly and enter this happy realm and meet their deceased relatives and friends? Times are changing, mores are changing, views on suicide are changing. The Catholic Church has long regarded it as a sin, and until recent years forbade any burial in a Catholic cemetery. Well, they've changed on that too. And as I showed you earlier in the Pew survey, 2/3 of the lay Catholics in the United States do not agree with that ancient belief. So the times are changing, and the Catholics that were surveyed, most of them believe that physician-assisted death is all right. And so the lesson for us here is that we make an ethical judgment as to the reasonableness of a patient's request to end this painful life and move on. It depends on that current patient's vision of what's going to happen to him after death, not on official doctrines that have been taught in the past. They feel that exchanging a distressing, painful existence here for restoral to health and a blissful, happy reunion with those who've gone before them. Shouldn't a caring physician be willing to help them move to this healthier, happier state of being? Moral principles are not fixed in time. Consulting ethicists need to adjust to people's changing concepts of what is right, what is wrong, and where they're going when they leave this life. We must ask them, where do they think they're going next? Well, where do you think you're going next? Thank you.